Friends, let us introduce to you the beautiful Dr. Deb Miller.
When asked why did you cheat? Why did you violate trust? And they say, I don't know. I mean, it's kind of honest. They really haven't taken the time to really figure out why they cheated. And that answer to why is a lifelong journey. And that's maybe somewhat discouraging for people to hear.
I think that the reason why people cheat is because someone will see a side of them or look at them in a way that their partner no longer looks at them.
What did you like during the affair? Like, that's a really interesting question I've never asked any of my clients.
And what did you like about yourself?
Yeah, what did you like about yourself?
Yeah.
What did you like about what that person said or did? And it's like they're craving what somebody else sees in them. And that's not always about sex. It doesn't start with like boinking necessarily. So
that'll be the name of the episode.
Boinking.
This podcast represents the opinions of our hosts and guests. The content here should not be taken as medical advice and is for informational purposes only. This podcast also does not establish a standard of care, doctor-patient, or client relationship. No guarantee is given regarding the accuracy of any statements or opinions made on the podcast or website. And because each person is so unique, all listeners are encouraged to connect with counseling and medical professionals for assistance with their personal journey. All people, places, and scenarios mentioned in the podcast have been changed to protect the privacy of those involved.
Welcome to We're Not Fine. I'm Dr. Talia Jackson.
And I'm Doug Jensen. We thank you for listening every week to our deep and thought-provoking conversations about relationships. Hello again, listeners and viewers
Welcome
of YouTube.
to what are we called? We're Not Fine.
All you have to do is look behind us at this gorgeous
It is gorgeous.
sign, We Are Not Fine. That is the name of this podcast. Welcome again.
Hello.
We're so excited, by the way, today. Like, this is a very exciting episode. We're talking about infidelity, which is a big topic. We talk about it periodically, but our guest, Dr. Deb Miller, talks so much about the cheater instead of the cheated on.
That's right.
And by the way, just bear with us as we use the word cheater. I feel like it has a shameful connotation, and, you know, all human beings are infallible and whatnot. So, but that is the word we're going to use today. But yeah, this is going to be a fun episode. How are you?
Fallible?
I'm sorry. I said infallible. We are fallible.
We're very human.
Thank you for correcting me with my grammar.
Oh my gosh. It is my pleasure.
I bet
it's
it
one
is.
of my best qualities.
Don't you mean worst qualities?
No, the best is when I'm like, actually, I've been trying really hard not to do that because no one likes a know-it-all.
You are somewhat, but I just keep
I try to keep it a secret.
I whisper about your
Wow.
your
You
errors.
sound really good up close like that.
I know.
Do we sound like we're in a tin can?
No.
Okay, friends, Dr. Deb, she was amazing. It was such a great interview. But yes, she focuses on the one committing the infidelity, which is an interesting angle. So there aren't a lot of resources out there. It's about why I'm sorry just isn't enough, how to deepen your apology. Fantastic episode.
Yep.
And she was lovely. But I have something really important that I needed to tell Doug.
Are you pregnant?
With triplets. And they're yours.
I know.
I'm sorry,
I
Rob.
was hoping. Sorry, Rob.
No, I found something so funny. And
Can I name
really
them? Oh, I'm sorry.
name our children.
Yeah.
Sure.
Okay. I'll think about it.
Okay, think about it. Oh, that was, I thought you had some really good.
I
Okay,
don't, but they're gonna
speaking of
rhyme.
names, this is what I want to tell you about.
Doug, Schmug, and Jug. Anyway, go ahead.
Meet Doug Jetson. That was what people used to call you when you were little.
Yeah. Where does that date us?
And my maiden name was Rudolph. So I had to go around being like, yeah, I know. I'm the only Jewish reindeer. Hardy har har. Okay, but listen to this.
And your nose.
This is why Minnesota is the best. I'm going to murder you. My nose is very cute.
You see how I just mentioned her nose and she's like going
I'm very
places in her.
proud of my
You
nose.
should be.
So every year, the Minnesota Department of Transportation has a Name a Snowplow contest.
Fascinating.
And Rob was telling me about this, and I was just cracking up, and I wanted to share it with you.
Okay.
Do you want to hear what some of the winners were? The only right answer is yes. But I need you to say yes with your eyes, too. I want it to feel like enthusiastic consent.
I'd love to hear.
All right, good enough. Okay.
I'm not an actor. Sorry.
Okay, ready?
Yeah.
Oh, my God. These are the winners of 2024.
Okay.
Okay. Taylor Drift. Clark W. Bliswald. Dolly Plowton.
Oh.
Beyonce. You're killing me, Squalls. So funny.
I don't even know what that one is.
Okay, do you not know what a squall is?
I don't.
Okay, well, when my glorious husband turned 50, I took him on a surprise trip to Vancouver. Actually, that's a lie.
It's pronounced Vancouver.
That's a lie. It's Quebec.
Okay, keep going.
Delete that. I have a terrible memory. Okay, and I experienced stop looking like that. Oh, that's just what your face looks like. I'm sorry. That must have been offensive.
Can we talk about your nose?
Can we talk about your testicular under eye bags? Okay, where were we? What was I saying? Oh, squalls.
Yes.
So in Quebec, it was the first time I experienced a squall.
Oh, I know what you're talking about.
And it is like a windstorm that will blow a trash can and a park bench across the city. And it's...
Chicago has squalls.
Yeah, they do. Like when you're holding on to a light pole.
Yep, which I've seen happen. Okay.
Okay, ready?
How many more do you have?
1,000, but I'm going to summarize it in just a few more. I'm going to pick out my favorites. Ready? Fast and Furious.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, and last year's winners, Cleopatra.
Well, that's pretty funny.
That's
pretty good.
Fleetwood Mac. Scoop. There it is.
Oh, that's pretty good. These are winners?
These are the winners.
Do they pick one winner or do all people who won?
There are, I think it's done by the different counties.
I love that.
Like you each get
a
winner. I just think it's so funny. And it's kind of sad because we don't have a single flake of snow on the ground right now. It's sad for polar bears, but not me.
Yep.
I love it.
Okay.
Don't tell.
So moving on from these beautiful names, we hope you enjoy this amazing episode. I hope it triggers some questions for you. We actually disagreed on something a bit at the end. And
we
feel
had
free
a fist fight at
to comment
the end.
on this. And then...
Team Talia or Team Doug?
You all know who to pick.
That's right.
So without further ado, which we usually say before an episode.
Without further ado.
Enjoy this episode.
Spell adieu.
A-D-I-E-A-U. No, does it have an A in it?
I'm not telling.
A-D-I-E-U.
I think actually without further ado is a different adieu. It's adieu and not adieu.
Are you thinking it's A-D-O-O-O-O-O? Because it's not.
We love you guys. Enjoy. Friends, let us introduce to you the beautiful Dr. Deb Miller, a licensed professional counselor with 25 years of experience working with couples struggling with relationship repair, much like us.
Yeah. Yep.
And you have a very interesting take on infidelity, and you work with the betrayer or the cheater, and you have created some amazing resources for the one that cheats and not the one that's been cheated on, which is definitely there's a gap in the resources there. And you have written a book called More Than Sorry, 5 Steps to Deepen Your Apology After You've Committed Infidelity.
So I'm so excited about this, Deb. And I'll tell you, when we oftentimes have couples come in, infidelity is one of those biggest topics that kind of comes to come into play, right?
Yeah.
And it's either fresh or it's been something that they've been dealing with on their own for a while and they don't know what to do. One of the things I can't wait to talk about, because I have kind of my own kind of 3-prong approach to helping cheaters recover and relationships recover, which of course I'll cover in this conversation. But when you talk about steps, I think people generally need a guide. They need absolutely like, what can I do to overcome this? And, we're going to talk about this later, but I think a lot of times, of course, cheating can be overcome. And once people understand why they're doing what they're doing, I think that can be a really significant piece about not only healing, but having a probably even deeper connection with someone once they've dealt with those issues. So I'm kind of curious about what you think about that. But, start by telling us a little bit about what got you interested in this topic and specifically focusing on the cheater aspect of an infidelity situation.
Right. Yeah. Glad to be here. Glad to talk about this because you're right. There's a ton of resources for the person that was violated, that was cheated upon. And what would happen for me in my office in private practice, primarily back in St. Louis, was that, the couples would come in, typically drug in by the person that was cheated on, and, would need a lot of support and help and empathy and validation for all the pain that they had been through. And they would ask, why did this happen? And, they were truly in crisis. And then you turn to the person who actually was the adulterer or the cheater, and they would be mute. They would just be like shrinking into themselves going, I don't know. I'm sorry. Let's move on. What more do you want from me? Mm-hmm. And it just got stuck. The repair of the couple got stuck. And it was really hard to give space to the person that violated or betrayed to really explore their transgression, to explore themselves. And, they want to quickly get in with the eraser and play like it didn't happen and move on. And that's what human nature. We'd love to not dwell in our guilt, dwell in our pain, dwell in our transgression. So the challenge was to figure out how to balance the two of them. They both need help. They both need help.
Well, and that is absolutely my experience as well in private practice. Like half of my couples, right? And if it isn't necessarily like betrayal or cheating, it's just like, even if it's like a financial betrayal or, and we'll talk more about all the different kinds of cheating or betrayal or breaking of trust. But it's absolutely like there's this sense of maybe defensiveness that doesn't allow for a person to just sit with the fact that they really fucked up.
Well, and there's so many things we're going to cover today, Deb, but, I would say not only that defensiveness, but that comes from shame, right? Like we all, I'm sure there's a lot of times this, and what I've experienced is embarrassment and like wishing they hadn't. You said something so substantial when you said the piece about like, oftentimes people are like, let's move on. It's done. That will not do anything. There's no awareness of what's gone on. There's no awareness internally of what led to that. So I love that you kind of commented that that's the first, reaction that a lot of times people who are in that infidelity situation, who have done the infidelity, will say, let's move on. It's okay now. Go ahead.
Yeah. And in fairness, when asked why did you cheat? Why did you violate trust? And they say, I don't know. I mean, it's kind of honest.
Right.
They really haven't taken the time to really figure out why they cheated. Yeah. And that answer to why is a lifelong journey. And that's maybe somewhat discouraging for people to hear. But
I think it's brilliant.
It evolves.
Yeah.
Deb, I hope that people don't hear that way, because I think therapy is a lifelong experience. I think human growth is a lifelong experience. I think if everyone was in therapy for the rest of their lives, they would be in really good shape, because we are always changing and evolving, whether it's physically or socially or financially or career-wise or in our interpersonal relationships. Our needs change. I oftentimes talk about my own experience of kind of coming to my awareness of who I really was at about 40 years of age, which was 10 years in the future. I'm kidding. Many years behind me. It never
gets old.
So, I mean, that's the piece. This is a process. I love that you said that.
It is.
Yeah.
Yep.
Well, and I think the answer to why is different on day one of the revelation that there was an affair versus 5 years later, 10 years later. And that's okay. It shows that you're still having the courage, the humility, the willingness to self-analyze, to question what motivated you and make guesses, because there's no definitive response or answer to why. I was just going to say it's just kind of a guessing game in some ways.
I think it's really important for everybody to hear that it is sort of unsatisfying at the beginning of the work because it isn't like, well, let me tell you what my exact unmet need has been and how I've been not courageous enough to tell you. And so in a weak moment after 2 cocktails, the woman I work with or the man that I work with or whomever, it was this moment that I just didn't even think about. I mean, it's like, how do you even explain these things when you don't have awareness?
But I might say that, you said unsatisfactory at the beginning. I might say I think it's really relieving for a lot of people at the beginning to kind of come clean about, this happened and whether they were caught or whether or not they've decided to tell somebody. I've worked with a number of people. I made a horrible mistake at the beginning of my career. I was kind of green. I didn't know the nuances of how I wanted to assess a client system. And I was working with this couple and I said, any infidelities I need to be aware of? And the guy goes, yeah. And the woman said, so that's the first I've heard that. And I'm like, fuck me.
Oh, no.
I totally blew this one. I blew it out of the water. I'm like, oh my God, where's my supervisor?
Cut right to the chase.
Oh my Lord, I did. But I thought it was a fine question. It isn't. I should have nuanced myself a little bit. But going back to this, I think there's relief oftentimes. So we'd love to hear more from you about this.
Yeah, I mean, that's the confessional aspect of it. And I'm not Catholic, but there is something about saying it out loud. And because the definition of an affair is that it's a secret relationship. Mm-hmm. It's a secret. Yeah. And so that's such a burden to carry and not tell. And it's crazy what we can do in our own defense mechanisms to minimize that secret, to justify it, to find some way of being okay with it. I mean, it's crazy when you step back from it and go, how did I do that for so long? How did I lie to myself for so long? And so that's the hope of, and that's one of the steps is saying it out loud. Because if you could just say it, and it doesn't mean you confess to the world, you don't confess necessarily your children, your parents, your neighbor, but you tell someone, hopefully a few people, and you need to process it out loud. As Doug said, therapy is an easy place to process it out loud without continuing to wound the wounded, the person that you cheated on.
Right.
And yet the person that got cheated on needs to know something.
Right.
They need to know a little bit about what's happening, a little bit more about the why, the self-discovery. And so there's a nuance there of how to talk about the affair without reopening all the wounds.
I really like the idea that it's a couple's journey of discovery and that both partners might be stumbling upon some insights at the same time.
Well, sure.
And that maybe it just feels like it's one way to externalize the problem so it doesn't feel like me against you or I'm good and you're bad, but it's more there's been this rupture. Let's look at it together. I mean, in an ideal world, of course, there's so much pain and so much betrayal. And Dr. Deb, I'm curious, have you found, and I mean, we could talk about our experience too, but have you found that all types of betrayal are equally traumatizing and scarring, like finding out that your partner is flirting online or liking people's posts on Instagram or emotional affair or a one-night stand, or like, do they all land as the same amount of breaking trust?
I have a lot of opinions on that.
Well, I mean,
I'm like biting at the bullet.
We all have opinions.
All right, I'll go first, and Doug, I want to hear yours.
Yeah, please.
I don't think it's the same. I mean, I think it's about the recipient and their own happiness, their own sense of self-worth. And then, of course, there's that relationship dynamic that has been going on for a long time. I spent a lot of time talking to couples about how do you rebuild liking each other.
Nice.
Because there's so much resentment that maybe the affair, the secret, whatever, was the breaking point. Who knows? I mean, that's the journey, the process of trying to dissect it all. But the person that was wounded really does get to dictate if and how the repair will happen, in the sense of, are they really willing to let go somewhat of their pain?
Deb, one of the things I love that you just did is you kind of focused on it depends on the recipient or the wounded and their response to it. I'm going to go a little different direction about this as well. I would say that in terms of like betrayals being different, I think they can be very different. I think there's a really big difference between liking a woman's post or something, if it's a heterosexual male, or vice versa. I think there's a big difference between that or watching porn, which I've had couples come in and say that that feels like cheating to them, and a several years long relationship where there's a different family, which I've also dealt with in my practice.
You're right. That is like next level.
Oh, it's next level. And there's so many different layers of that, and then complicating factors about like what the wounded's role is in those other kids, because they're kind of, anyway, that was a wild situation.
Wow.
I'm also going to add, I work a lot with people with HIV, living with HIV. And so I've dealt with a lot with people who have contracted sexually transmitted diseases, and the reality of like something like HIV or herpes, something that is lifelong and not curable or treatable. Those things complicate matters too, because every time there's a complicating medical issue related to any STD or STI, the reality is it brings up that wound. And so I think there's a lot of different pieces. And
like, especially if someone contracted it.
Oh yeah.
In a not an honest way.
Oh
like
my
someone
God.
didn't tell
That's
them.
how it works.
Yeah.
I've had that happen
horrible.
actually several times in my practice too.
Horrible.
And, I had one couple where, he had contracted HIV. The spouse was horrified as a heterosexual female, and we had to work through that. And luckily she tested negative, but the reality is she went to go get tested a few more times. It was so traumatizing to know that risk was there. So I would say that the layers are really indicative of how bad it can be. And I also will say that it depends on how quickly the person is able to identify it. I've also had clients who come to me and they're like, I cheated on this work trip. Do I need to talk about it with my spouse? Which I want to hear your take on that.
Oh my gosh, yeah, that's not even in
I know
the
it's not on here. It just dawned on me as you were talking, like when people come and they say, do I have to tell my spouse this? I want to know what you think. Because I have a rule
maybe
of thumb.
it is. Maybe it is in the agenda.
I don't think it's in the agenda. But yeah, how soon that happens, Deb, I have... that was...
I know, that's a tough one.
I love that. I love that face of yours and that sigh. What I would... I'll put my 2 cents, but I want to say first, if you cheat on your spouse and you go directly to them after the event and you say, I need to tell you something. If it's quick, that remorse is really much more powerful and, I think tangible for the person experiencing it. And they see the remorse in their spouse. They see that they want to come clean and be transparent moving forward. I am going to say that I have chosen with clients and working together with clients, the decision not to tell their spouse that they cheated. I have them make sure they are STD tested to make sure they're not going to transmit anything. I have them understand, and I work on exactly what you're talking about, which is let's help people understand what it is that is going on for them to the best of their ability, about why they did what they did. But, and I don't think it's always critical. Sometimes I think it can be more harmful.
What if you were the person cheated on and your partner, their therapist, was like, Doug doesn't need to know this. What
I would say is that I take jujitsu and I know how to choke both your therapist and you. I'm kidding. I don't want to do that. But I wouldn't like it on the other side, except if I never know and my relationship is intact.
How do you know you're never going to know? And because what you said.
So you're hearing yourself. We don't know the right answer, and we have to help our client figure out what's the best outcome for them. Obviously, they need to explore why they're having one-night stands and what that's about and what their commitment is to their significant other. And certainly when we talk about violation of trust, about secrecy, it's about breaking a covenant. And what is their covenant? And nowadays we got more and more polyamorous relationships, and then that's not cheating technically.
Ethically non-monogamous relationship. And the word ethical
right.
challenges that moral code, right?
Yeah.
Yes, exactly. Which is, it still brings some relationship issues, of course, that they need to work on, but it's not the secret. So if someone had a one-night stand and they feel remorseful, and they want to tell their spouse, you want to make sure it's just not for the confessional, naive, like if I tell, then we'll be over it and I can move on. So you have to really slow them down. And time is such a huge factor in all of this repair.
I agree.
I mean, it can't be too impulsive. Many affairs are impulsive initially, and you have to really get people to slow down, especially even the person that got hurt. needs to really slow down and not have to make a decision if they're in or out of the relationship immediately.
Mm-hmm.
They have the, give them the bandwidth to like process it, watch, listen, see how things are progressing.
I mean, my 2 cents is that I also don't think it's a one size fits all. Not to say it's a one size fits all, but I feel like there are a few factors that can certainly make it a million times worse. And I think one of the factors is if you're busted instead of being the one to say, oh my gosh, honey, I did a thing, we need to talk. Yep. And the second one is if it's been over years or even over weeks, if it's been more than once, I think that's a different kind of betrayal because it's
emotional as well, right?
And it's like you have made the decision not to tell me 1,000 times every day, and you've still given me a Valentine's Day gift, or you still picked our kids up from school, and all of those moments have been a lie because you were doing this other secret thing, right? It's like that ultimate betrayal.
Yeah, I call that the divided life.
Ooh.
That people can do it. You can like be the great citizen churchgoer and have a secret family in another town. I mean, it's crazy what we can do in our heads and in our actions. We kind of want to compensate for it, but it's the divided life that gets us in trouble. And the only way to make that connection is through self-exploration, talking to someone, exploring all of that. It's challenging.
Deb, I wonder if you might comment. I'm going to switch gears just a little bit. Like we kind of reference now many times, like why people cheat. What would you say are the primary things you find are related to why people cheat?
Yeah, Talia put that as a question. I was grateful to think about that. I mean, I really think it's about intimacy. We're all craving closeness. We're all craving being involved with other people who know us on an emotional, physical, spiritual, recreational level. And it can't just necessarily be one person, but within the boundaries of a significant other relationship, we have to make sure that we know how to be intimate, and when especially families or couples who have had kids or they're going through all those stresses with young kids and work, we all get somewhat masters. We can get masters of cohabitating. Really good at living in the same house, the same bed, really functioning on a really high level, getting things done, taking the kids, paying the checks. But the intimacy is the missing piece. Yeah. And so when we meet someone that maybe flatters us or makes us feel like our ego is boosted or that we're, attractive, then it's hard.
Yeah.
Yes. Yep. I completely agree. I think that the reason why people cheat is because someone will see a side of them or look at them in a way that their partner no longer looks at them, or they see a part of them that they miss about themselves, a part of them that maybe has like fallen asleep or died a little bit. If you are, you're married a long time or you've been in a relationship a long time, you have kids, you've got to deal with diapers and carpools and dishes. Like nothing is less sexy than those things. And then all of a sudden you meet someone who looks at you like you're young and buoyant and untethered and it reminds you of when you were 19 and there you go.
And that's part of the work. It's really important in terms of helping the cheater explore what happened is for them to talk about what they liked about themselves in the affair.
Oh, that's beautiful. Yep, spot on.
Because to notice how they needed some of the whatever strokes they got from the other person, or how they maybe were more outgoing, or they were more romantic with the person, or they were more energetic, more positive, who knows? But then how do you take how you were in the affair back into maybe your primary relationship and hopefully into future relationships.
Yeah.
I don't want to minimize how good affairs can feel. I wanted to honor the pieces that worked, that kept them in it.
It's so
and that
interesting.
They need to figure out how to hold on to it.
Absolutely. I mean, it kind of speaks to two things for me that you just said. First of all, I had to write down like What did you like during the affair? Like, that's a really interesting question I've never asked any of my clients.
And what did you like about yourself?
Yeah, what did you like about yourself?
Yeah.
What did you like about what that person said or did? Yeah. And it kind of brings me, like, I kind of oftentimes go down that path. I shouldn't say kind of, I do, down that path of like addiction. Like, I think about what mirrors this with addiction. And I always use the HALT method: hunger, anger, lonely, tired, the acronym HALT. And I think to myself, those things are so related to me. If you are resentful at your spouse or significant other, if you are feeling lonely, if you are, which goes to your intimacy comment, right? Or if you're feeling really fatigued and you're tired of life and you have kids and laundry and dishes and all of the mundane paying bills things that we do.
And I think hungry might just be like a sense of longing or just unmet need.
Hunger for anything, right? So it's not just food.
Right.
But I find myself thinking, I oftentimes work within that paradigm for people to understand like what was missing. And it brings back what we talked about at the very beginning of this episode, and that's that therapy is critically important. You have to understand that as we grow, how do we keep our relationships alive? How do we keep ourselves growing in our connection to people? How do we make sure that our sex life remains active? And I will tell you, and I speak from personal experience, I've learned so much more about myself as I get older on that sexual level. And if I were to ever have a boyfriend or a significant other, I would find myself really needing to continue that dialogue, like make sure that we are stimulated and happy and whatnot, because that ongoing communication gets lost so often. So when you talk about intimacy needs, how great it is to just keep talking about it and talking about it and talking about it. And I'm big on weekly meetings. Like I think every couple should have weekly meetings, or throuple, or any polyamorous situation. Have ongoing meetings to make sure you're all on the same page and you're getting satisfied and your needs met. Please.
Yeah. The question is that to periodically say, how are we doing?
That's it.
You need to really talk about your relationship. But, when you think about chit chat, it's great. We can all, how was your day, honey? What'd you do today? What did the kids do? Whatever. That's fine. But then once, not daily, once, at least every 2 weeks, how are we doing?
Yeah.
Is there anything we need to be working on in our relationship? How can we feel closer? How can we have more fun?
Love it.
And it is a different love language for both, and I'm sure you've seen those 5 love languages. And that's a good framework to think about, because the physical intimacy need can be really high for one partner and not as high for the other. And so then the now what? How do you handle that? And how do you make it so both feel loved and liked? And that's challenging, because we're going to be attracted probably to someone who's not just like ourselves. We tend to be attracted to opposites, and that's interesting initially and then annoying as heck later.
You can swear. I swear all the time on here. I can?
Oh, yeah, you did.
Oh, yeah.
I did before.
Oh, yeah. We swear all the time.
You saw me pause.
I do feel like, what you're saying is also that people need to own their own unmet needs, where it is really challenging if in your partnership, someone does have a much higher libido than the other. And I don't know about you guys, but I feel like I have yet to meet a couple that both people involved are wanting intimacy and sex the same amount.
Right.
And so do you feel like that is one of the highest contributing factors to why people step out on their relationships?
I mean, sex is a big driver. Physical intimacy is a big driver. Yeah. It really is.
When you talked about intimacy, Deb, what I heard was both emotional and physical. Mm-hmm. And that's why I would say it's not just about the sex piece. It's about like really caring and seeing that person. I mean, we just talked about why people cheat. And it's like they're craving what somebody else sees in them. And that's not always about sex. It doesn't start with like boinking necessarily. So
that'll be the name of the episode.
Boinking.
Your affair doesn't start with boinking.
I like that. Keep it.
You'll get a lot of viewers.
Actually, I do love that name. Please remember it, Alex. Feel free to use it. I know.
That's hilarious.
Do you want that next to your name, Deb? Because that's where it would be.
I don't think so.
Sure, why not?
Whatever.
But it's interesting too. I think that's an interesting question. I just don't think it's always that. I think it's loneliness is not about getting
loneliness. Yes.
Right?
Well, unless you do have some sex addiction, which I feel like there's a lot of that too. I don't know exactly where to say that line is, but I always worry about my couples where one person is consistently, weekly being like, I've mentioned this a million times, like physical touch is my love language. I want more sex. I don't know why it's so hard. You always seem like you're too tired or you're too sick or you're too busy. And that's a real unmet need for me.
Sure.
For like years, people, and then I'm like,
Right.
I worry about
But when
them.
you talk about sex addiction, I think loneliness is oftentimes a trigger. Again, the HALT, hunger, anger, lonely, tired. I think that's a big piece of what triggers addiction.
But
and
with
triggers
addiction, I think that sense of emptiness and hunger never goes away. So you're always looking for something to scratch the itch, but it's an unscratchable itch. Is that the name? What?
No, I like boinking better.
Boinking,
the unscratchable inch.
Inch. It's a scratchable inch.
Oh my God, that's kind of funny. We have so many times. You're right. We're going to get lots of viewers no matter what we call this, Deb. And I will apologize that you are on this episode.
No shit.
With boinking and scratching an inch.
But I think there is, I don't want to stereotype, but I will a little bit. Gender-wise, I think the need for males traditionally is, in order to feel connected, they need the physical. And for women to feel connected, they need the talking, emotional, the hugs, and so that's the understanding of each other's needs and differences. And it's saying yes or not. You can say no as long as you promise to try the next day or something. You can't just say no.
No, I like that too. I talk to my couples about like there needs to be a quick-ish turnaround time, because if somebody has a bid of love and affection and intimacy, you can't just be like, no, I'm too tired. You have to figure out then when you're going to initiate, or that sting of rejection and neglect really does linger.
But that's the challenge of repairing of an affair, because that's like the tip of the iceberg. Is some things have been happening in their relationship for a while, and yes, our inclination as therapists is to jump in and try to figure out, well, what's your relationship like before the affair? Yeah. And there is a time for that. But my intention is to help the person who had the affair really react in the short term, and not like finger point, like, well, I haven't had sex for the last 3 months, therefore I feel justified, or I
can't
feel like
stand that.
No one appreciates me, and therefore you get it. And so there's has to be a lot of humility on the part of the person who cheated to accept that they and you talk about shame, Doug, but I also want to empower them. I want them to feel guilty.
Right.
Guilt means I accept what I did wrong, and I'm going to make some changes.
Take responsibility.
Whereas shame is I'm a horrible, terrible person, and I'm never going to be different. So I want them to feel some guilt. I want them to take responsibility. I want them to recognize that they are human, though, and humans make mistakes, and we screw up, and yet it's not a death wish. And that's the hard part to instill in couples, is that this was horrific. And this was traumatizing, and no, you'll never forget it, but you can move forward, and you can use it as a signal for how you can be more connected and healthier in the future. It's that part of that growth.
Deb, you said death wish, and it kind of brings up a question for me about like the idea or the proverbial saying, once a cheater, always a cheater. I will tell you, I 100% disagree with that statement. I think it's really trite and simplified. I'm curious what you think of that.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, people can change. People do change, but they have to make the commitment to change. They have to have an intention of being different, of learning from their mistakes. Our society has this huge, the big red adulterer label on anyone who has. So that's the hard part. When someone gets cheated on, they have to not necessarily tell people, because the assumption is everyone's going to say, oh my God, once a cheater, always a cheater. You better get out of there. There's no way this will fix, and then they feel like, they can't take the time to process and work with their significant other to see if it's repairable or not.
I mean, I've had a few, I'd say that in my experience of working with couples for almost 20 years, that you've got a 50-50 chance of making your relationship work after an affair. And I also find that it tends to be about when you are the one that has cheated, it's about the ownership and remorse. And then it's about committing to a journey of insight and self-awareness and behavior change. Because like what I like to tell my couples is, yes, you know, you look back at your old relationship and it was perfect and there was no trust issues. But now you have an opportunity to have a real relationship, not a perfect one, but you can choose to get into it, talk about all the gory details, and you can have a level of transparency and intimacy and connection that you didn't have before. You can really know each other, warts and all, and have it be the most beautiful connected relationship ever. And I've seen it happen.
Absolutely. I was kind of thinking about that 50-50. Do I think it's 50-50? I think if they're in my office and if both parties identify a willingness to look at things openly and honestly, and you know, there have been times that some of my couples just need details. Like I will set aside 2 hours with people, you know, just have a question and answer session. And I will tell you 9 times out of 10, the questions start and the person who has been wounded kind of quickly stops and they're like, all right, I got enough. I appreciate that he's willing to tell me or he or she is willing to tell me, but I fucking don't want to know those details anymore because they're painful, right? Yeah. But there are some questions that need to be answered. And I always tell the cheater, and we're using that word today, it's kind of a, you know, whether we like the word or not, it's what we're using today. The reality is, you know, the cheater being willing to answer all those questions as transparently as possible, even if they're painful, like, did you have sex in our bed? Tell the truth. It is at that point about telling the truth. And I remember I was helping one couple do this and the cheater actually went to the far end of the room and sat in the chair and the person was on the other end of the couch. They were like really far from each other. And I remember thinking, if I need to jump across the table and sit in between them, I will. Oh my God. But it was very clear he was like worried about getting hit with some of his answers. And I'm like, oh, I don't love this. But really, this was a heterosexual couple. She kind of stopped asking. It just wasn't all that relevant. I want to go to something, and we're way off our script here. But, you know, Talia, you referenced that approach that you might think is important. It's very similar to my 3-prong approach, which is a really significant amount of remorse in the apology, a sincere apology, having, and you said journey of insight, but I would say just having a lot of information about why you did what you did and not doing it anymore. Like I just kind of keep it really simple, right? Deb, I wonder if you might talk about your 5 steps.
Thanks. Yeah. Well, to try to make it digestible for the people, because honestly, the person who cheated is not running out to buy my book. You know, it's usually the person that was wounded.
Yes, they are. Starting now.
That's hilarious.
Out and
I love
buy
that.
Dr. Deb's book. Everyone, if you are even thinking of cheating,
wow,
do it.
That's very funny.
But typically it's the person that was hurt is handing the book to their significant other and go, you need to work on yourself. You need to read about yourself. So step 1 is empathy. I mean, you've got to understand how horrible the wound is that you've just imposed on the other person. And, you know, and there's a skill to that. There's learning how to articulate empathy, not only feel it, but to articulate it. And I'm sure you guys teach your clients that skill, because it is a skill. And then the second step is discovery. I call it navel gazing. It's not in a hedonistic way, but to kind of self-analyze yourself. And there's a whole lot to that. Like, what's your personality style? What's your attachment style? What's your
trauma history?
Moral inventory, history. Yeah, all that. Defense mechanisms, coping mechanisms. So that's a really huge chapter. Step 3 is, I had to look, say it out loud. Yeah. So you're doing this work and you have to find at least one confidant to talk about it with so that you can process, so you can be more honest. Because you know, it's like the other person can be your mirror and then you can be more authentic with them, hopefully. And then the 4th goal is set restitution goals. How am I going to be different? What am I going to do differently? How am I going to make change? And then the last step is to ask for forgiveness. You may or may not get it. I model writing a letter that really starts with sharing what you've learned about yourself and what you know you need to work on. You know, that humility, courage, and intention to be different.
That's beautiful.
So it's a process though. And this book is not intended to sit down and read it in one sitting.
Yeah.
It's a journaling process. It's a reflection process. It's a digest it a little bit at a time, which that's hard for the person that got hurt to wait for this revelation.
I find myself kind of struck by this 5-step approach that you have. I appreciate every single one of them.
Yeah,
I think
love it.
one of the things I think about is the grief process, the 5 phases of grief, or 6, depending on what theoretical framework you share. But I think there's a part of this that I found myself thinking, so this could go different ways. Like you don't have to necessarily do them necessarily in order from where I sit. Like you could say something out loud the first time as the first step to somebody. Like it could be that they could be in different phases or different ways that this shows up in order. But I'm really intrigued by this. I want to go to what your 4th step is, restitution. The question is, boy, are there different ways of doing that? I was working with a couple once where the cheated on was so angry she wanted to go post a big billboard in this person's yard saying a whore lives here.
Oh my God, revenge.
Well, and revenge. And I literally said, if that's what's going to get you past this, go ahead. And the person who cheated looked at me and said, what did you say? And I said, I'm giving the cheated on permission to do what they need to do. By the way, the minute I gave permission, they're like, I don't need to do that. I just needed to know that I could.
What a relief.
Oh,
what a relief.
I got to be honest. I was like, let's talk about the legalities of doing that. Maybe you'll get in trouble with the law. But, if this is what you need to move forward, I don't think this is where the cookie cutter approach to what restitution is not really applicable. So I'm kind of, I think people need different things. I tell people, keep your phone open, keep your computer open, do whatever that person needs to build trust. Transparency in all ways. Like, do not hide your phone anymore.
Because what I will say is that one of the pieces that's more important than anything is that the person that was cheated on starts to doubt that I thought that 2 + 2 = 4. I didn't have any doubt in my mind that this person was trustworthy, but now I'm not even trusting my own sense of what happened. And so that transparency has to be a part of the restitution of 2 + 2 does equal 4. I'm saying I'm going out to happy hour with Bob, Jeannie, and Cam, and there you look at my phone, there's proof right there. All of a sudden the trust builds because 2 and 2 = 4.
I also want to make a comment about the example that I just gave. Like, one of the things I oftentimes find is that people do get angry as the person who cheated with their loved one instead of the loved one themselves and holding them accountable. Like, it's really easy to blame that other person for seducing their partner or whatnot.
Oh yeah.
And the bottom line is the partner is still the responsible one. So you can be mad at anybody else that they slept with or the person that they paid as an escort or sex worker for services. But the reality is it's their decision and they need to be held accountable. Going back to your comment about responsibility, right?
So true.
Guilt, taking responsibility for being human. So I want to make that note because it seems like it happens a lot. Go ahead, Deb.
Yeah, I mean, I'm thinking of a couple of couples I've worked with who successfully got through it. And I have to say a lot of it, the success was on the wounded person. They set some expectations and but they also were willing to be curious and to let go and to, accept that the past was the past and they can't change it. But, the transparency piece is I think your 3rd step, Doug, of the simple repair. Yep. You have to give up your privacy. You don't have privacy right now.
That's right.
It's a privilege that's earned.
And very honestly, this is where sometimes, I feel like I'm always interrupting here. This is where I would also tell people, be clear on what you want. Because this is a fork in the road by which some of my clients have decided, I do want an ethically non-monogamous relationship, or I do want polyamory, and I'd like to explore that with you. But it's about being upfront before you cause the damage and asking for what you need. Like, I think about what transparency is. If you need to watch porn, if you want to jack off every day in addition to having sex or whatever, however you want to work your sexual experience or your loneliness experience or your intimate experience, you have to be able to be upfront about that, whatever it is. I have had couples that are trying to open their relationships, both gay and straight. And, sometimes that works and sometimes it doesn't. Boy, does that take a lot of insight on yourself and self-awareness to do that.
And openness and willingness to say out loud everything. Yeah, I had one couple that was dealing with pornography. And, she was really cool accepting it, and he went to get help, but they would periodically had problems because he would sneak back into it. And it wasn't rational. It's like, why didn't you just tell her? She knows it, just tell her, be honest. But there's something about the shame of it. And, if I don't tell him, I won't get caught, and that naivete. And that's another interesting thing about in today's world with our technology. The reality of getting caught is very high.
Like you are going to
absolutely.
get caught. I find that what this explains, like even when you think about all of the different steps of deepening your apology, for those listening, this explains why I'm sorry just isn't enough.
Right. People
need to know why and how and make sense of all of it. And one dynamic that it didn't even occur to me when I was writing the itinerary, but I'm dying to know what the two of you think about this. The dynamic of the cheater is, quote unquote, the bad guy or gal, and now has this sentence of like, you are in repair mode, you are in the doghouse, and then the cheater never feels like it's the right time for them to be able to speak their needs because they're in the doghouse. So when do I get to say, these are actually some of the components in our marriage or our relationship that I don't feel great about, and some of the reasons why I cheated to begin with, because that sounds like blaming the victim, right? So like that dynamic is so hard to get past, I find.
I know. And I have this weird 4 month, I give them like just to put some sort of context or boundary or hopefulness around it. Like, come on, stick with it for 4 months of doing your repair, of saying I'm sorry, of working on yourself. That's kind of the framework I said for getting through my book. Take your time, and then you get to say, and this is again the skill. How do you say, here's what I need from you? And so the push is to know that, yes, you do have to grovel in the dirt for a while. You have to show remorse, and you have to be the bad guy in a sense, but it's not forever. And that's the hopefulness I keep wanting to build into repair. This isn't a forever sentence. You are going to move forward and through this, but you have to go through it. And that's 4 months is nebulous. I have no idea if that's
no. It gives people a framework,
not enough, but
right.
Yeah, it's just a framework.
I might say years or a lifetime, but yes, that gets overwhelming, and then you can get into the hopelessness of the whole thing, right?
But it's a good reminder that like we're not going to fix this in this moment. It's like you're committing to a process and a journey, not a quick fix.
Yep. And, I want to say two things about this. We've talked a number of times about like how often it is that the person who is wounded gets blamed, like they weren't putting out, or they didn't touch me the way that I asked for, or I did ask for sex on a regular basis and they didn't do it, or these are the things that I want to explore. I want to explore BDSM. I want to explore these kinks and fetishes in my relationship, and they are not doing it. Like, you can't do that. I always make it very clear at the beginning of my work with people where infidelity is an issue they present in the therapy. I always say, so just be aware you are not responsible for that person's cheating behavior in any way, shape, or form. You have nothing to do. You are not responsible for their choices. And it's really important to make that delineation, I think, right up front. I want to say two things, Deb, about how beautiful you have talked about this. You said two things, and I know they seem really simple to you probably, but at the beginning of this conversation, you said people can change. Mm-hmm. And it really hits me as kind of the core of what therapy is about and what we as therapists want to instill in people about what this process is. I want to just reiterate, you said it so simply and we kind of passed out, and it just like blows me over, because we have to believe as clinicians that people can change in order to work with them, and that we have to hold on to that hope for them. But also, kind of whenever somebody asks me like what therapy is about, and I've said this a million times on the podcast, so for our viewers, please accept my apologies for keep saying it. But I believe this is therapy is about living an honest life. It's about figuring out who you are. It's about deciding how to live your life that is based on what you are and who you are. And everybody, of course, gets to do that in this lifetime, as long as it doesn't infringe or hurt other people, is my caveat. But you said something as well about just say it. Like, just tell the person what's going on for you. Tell them what you need. If you want to watch porn, don't do it secretly, because they're going to see your history at some point. I don't even know how that works. I understand now that incognito, I think it's called, or something where you go like in a different screen. It really isn't secret. I look at this and
is that, right?
And I think it's right. I think it's kind of funny. So this whole idea of like, no matter what you need, no matter what you want, and we live in a society, and you talked about religion before, like you're not Catholic, but the idea of like being upfront and honest and coming clean. I think there's a part of this that we really hold on to such shame about sexuality in particular. And the reality is, whatever you are, whoever you are, you get to live this life in the way that makes you most satisfied and happy, and just be honest about it. But that process of coming to grips, as somebody who took a lot of time coming out as a gay man, now find myself wanting to say I'm mostly gay. So I have this evolution of my experience as well. You want to make out? I'm kidding.
Always.
Always. So I would say, Deb, that you said it so simply, and I just want our viewers to hear those really simple but beautiful comments you made. So
yeah, because it's so discouraging to confess, to look in the mirror and say I'm full of sin or whatever label you want to put, and you could get just stuck, just totally stuck. You have to believe that you can change, things can change, and that there must have been a reason you stumbled into this other relationship, and you get to figure that out, and you get to make sure that the future does bring you intimacy on a physical, emotional, spiritual, and recreational level.
Yes, we all deserve that.
And the trust thing is so interesting. I think, how can I ever trust this person again? And trust is also, I really want to teach people that trust is about saying who you are, and that the other person can accept you.
Oh, that's so important.
It is important. It's what creates a healthy relationship, of course. Acceptance is a big piece.
And maybe like more than being accepted, even like celebrated, because that I think is many people's unmet need is I don't just want to be accepted and tolerated. I want to be celebrated. And there are people out there in the world that actually might think I'm fantastic and might be delighted by me and might laugh at all my jokes or not be annoyed by my this quality or that quality. Yeah. And so I feel like that is incredibly important. This is, okay, so talking about the trust and the forgiveness, this is sort of like the last piece, right? So like the trust and the forgiveness, if the point is we need to be living an honest life, that means we also have to be forgiving ourselves. We have to forgive our partner for cheating. We have to forgive ourselves for cheating. But when is that line between like, okay, can you hold the remorse and regret and shame and guilt, but also you're human and you need to forgive yourself? Like, how do you know when you're being too quick to forgive yourself or when it's the right time?
Too quick.
Yeah. You know what I mean?
Yeah. I mean, I think we're taught certainly in the Christian religion to forgive, and there's something about letting go of the anger, the hurt, the ticked off. I mean, selfishly, you really want to, it helps you, but can you be too forgiving of others or of yourself? That is something to keep processing. Have I truly accepted my wrongdoing? Have I truly been remorseful? And again, over time, you hope that it's you can look back at 5 years ago when I stepped over the line. I did something really stupid, and I can forgive myself now because look at me. I'm now honest, more authentic, more open to everyone else. So I don't know if that answers your question, Talia, but it's confusing to say about too much, because I think that is the hope initially of the person that cheated, is to say, just forgive me. Will you forgive me? Yes, yes. It's not a yes, no.
That's right.
And as I say to clients, you're not going to get back to 100% trust. It's just not. But you hope to get to 80%, or I don't know.
And the question is, should you 100% trust anybody else all the time? Because they are human. We all have fallibilities. We all make mistakes. Your comment just now, Deb, kind of triggers a question, which is, and I realize we're focusing in on the cheater, but what would you say and what tips would you have for the person who is betrayed as the betrayer goes through their process?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, to get their own therapist, they have to do some individual
Lovely
work.
answer.
First of all, they have to process their hate. They get to vent and scream and cry and yell and say, why? They get to,
Yeah.
they do get to. But they have to also figure out if they can listen and to the other person and be curious. And yet it's a bizarre time because it's, you want to talk about it all the time, and yet that's not practical and it's not healthy. So you have to like compartmentalize the fact that you're working on your repairing your relationship while you also have to go to work and you have to do laundry and you have to get the kids to school or whatever it is. And it's really hard. And so you have to do a lot of your self-care. It's a crisis. And, simply speaking, you have to sleep, eat, have something to laugh about every day, exercise. Get fresh air. It sounds so simple, but you also have to recognize that there's no time frame on this, and you have to let go of fixing it. But I coach them also that they're allowed to say out loud when it comes up, because we're bombarded by television, movies about people having affairs, and you may think you're done talking about the issue that you had with your partner, but it's going to flare it up again. And you get to say it out loud, but it's how do I say, Pat, today, for some reason, I drove by a yellow car and I remembered that that's what she or he drove. And I was thinking about your affair again. You get to say that.
Every time.
Every time.
Every time for as long as you need to.
Right.
Or want to.
And that's the price that the cheater has to pay, is that they have triggered their partner and they need to be open to hearing, like, it's not quite over. I've been triggered. But I think you're right. It's the how. Because if the partner is doing these snide, snippy remarks that are passive aggressive and real jabs, that is not in honor of repair. That is just like, I want you to hurt the way that you hurt me. And I feel like there's something about the cheated on. There's something that goes hand in hand. Many people feel like, if I forgive you, that means I'm condoning it, and it means I'm a sucker, and it means you're going to do it again, and you're going to make a fool of me again. So I'm always going to hold it over your head a little bit. And I feel like it takes so much courage and vulnerability to decide that you're in this. You actually love each other, and you're going to accept that your partner is a human that made a mistake who's trying. And that's where I feel like the willingness, it's all about the willingness. Yeah,
it's really interesting, though. I am finding myself aware that my ability to let go of a betrayal has not been great. I am an external processor. We've been joking about this a little bit. Like, I have to and I recently did this, and I just have to externalize some of this upset I have, and then I calm down, and then I can get to that place of like, I don't forget, but I can forgive and I can move on. But boy, do I, and I just want to say this to people who have a similar history to me of some abuse, some abandonment, some difficulty in their childhood. It is hard for me to do. And I own that as someone who knows what I'm doing when I'm working with others, but it's hard to do myself. But it takes time, and I end up putting up boundaries to protect myself really, really fast. Like, my wall goes up hard and fast.
I think that's common.
Yeah, I think it is common, but I come through it okay. Yeah. But I just want to give people permission as well to not be perfect. There is no way of doing this. You don't have to move on fast. You don't have to, forgive yourself or forgive the other person so quickly. But you cannot blame yourself. And I think it's a really tough thing to remember your own self-worth in a situation like this. So that's one tip I would say to people too who have been betrayed. Don't forget your self-worth, and don't forget that you should be chosen, and don't forget that every day that person should regard you, and don't lose yourself in this process. And it's hard not to do that. So
that's beautiful. Yeah.
Thank you.
Those are very powerful words. Yeah. It's tough, and nobody would wish this on anyone. They have to work through betrayal and repair. But it's the acceptance that the couple's at that point, and they have to figure out how to commit to, and was it Gottman? Somebody said,
Probably.
was asked research-wise, is there any factors that can predict which couples actually stay together?
yeah.
That's him, the four horsemen.
That's right.
Yeah, but it wasn't one of it also the commitment to the institution of marriage?
Oh, interesting.
That was a predictor?
It's a great question.
I don't know about that. Maybe that wasn't
I don't think that's in
Gottman.
the four, but it's interesting that what you just said is probably a piece. I don't think that's the entire story. Like, I think John Gottman's brilliant about his longitudinal research. And his wife, Julie, as well. But I think there's a part of this that I love that idea. Like, what do we think? What have we internalized about marriage or about commitment or about relationships? And really, I thank you for bringing it up, because that's really an important piece of like what expectations we put on ourselves. And it is fascinating to me that we get stuck in these very rigid ideas that are societally influenced about gender roles and about what a marriage is. And of course, as a gay man and having now the legal option to get married, which I don't want, just for anyone who's
rejecting
listening,
it.
I am
personally.
rejecting it entirely. It's not for me, but it is for other people, and I believe in it for other people. So everyone gets their own journey, is my point. Right. But you have to look inside and not just be told by other people what it should be. So
I have one.
I could talk about this for hours and hours with you, Deb.
I know, we can keep going.
I
There's time to talk to us about.
One last thought before we ask you to plug all the interesting things that you're up to. But it might be an unpopular opinion. But when you're just saying like never blame the cheated upon.
Yeah.
This is my unpopular opinion that's going to get me
I'm going to hate it
canceled.
if you contradict me.
I'm about to get canceled.
Yeah.
I feel like we are responsible for thinking about how we co-create our relationship, no matter which end we're on, if we're the cheater or the cheated upon. And that's not to say that if you are actively missing out on meeting the needs of your partner that you deserve anything. That's not at all what I'm saying. But if there's been an infidelity,
you're walking back there. Keep going.
If you find yourself in a relationship where somebody has cheated on you, I urge you to sit with the possibility that your partner might have unmet needs. That's 100% their responsibility for knowing how to speak about them. But if you think that you might make it hard for your partner to be really honest with you, if you're defensive, if you minimize them, if you poo-poo their needs, if they're telling you what they want and what they need, and you're making them feel badly about it, that's co-creating a situation.
No. This is what I'm going to agree with you that everyone is a participant in their relationship and everyone has a role in making it work. That is for sure. Mm-hmm. But it's very close to you saying you are contributing them to the other person's behavior. And if I punched you in the face right now, because
you're contributing to the unmet need and the other person is responsible for their behavior and they need to be brave enough to speak their truth. But if you're somebody who's impossible to talk to because you're very defensive and you start screaming right away, or if you don't want to hear about it, or if you make them feel bad, you are contributing to a relationship where honesty, like there's no safe space.
I think that's totally true, but I think that has nothing to do with infidelity. I don't think that has anything to do with someone else's behavior.
We want to hear from our listeners. We want to hear from our viewers and our listeners. What do you think? Mm-hmm. Team Doug, Team Talia. And I don't know, where's Team Deb? What do you think, Deb?
Well, I think, when you work with a couple, you're trying to work with how they bounce off of each other, right? You're trying to figure out, how they can change the energy between them, how they can both get their needs met. Yes. That's couples work.
Correct.
This work that I've been promoting is about the individual work of the person that violated the trust and what they should do. I'm not minimizing that the person that was wounded, that chose not to have an affair, they definitely still have work to do too. They do. So I'll be your peacekeeper between the two of you.
Oh, she's
and recognize
good.
That,
she's good.
I was just going to say, I know you're going to find a way to nuance this really beautifully.
Well, Dr. Deb.
You both make excellent points. I did not, the person, you did not make the person sleep with someone else.
Right.
They chose that action.
It's like if I punched you in the face right now, you're not responsible for that. I am.
I agree. In that particular situation, I agree. But
however,
you
annoy me a lot. So you can.
There we go. That's the co-creation.
I'm so kidding. I'm not going to do anything.
Dr. Deb, please tell our people. Doug's choking me. Where they can find you. Tell us again about your book, which I am totally going to have on my bookshelf.
Can't wait.
Thank you. Yeah, here it is. More Than Sorry, 5 Steps to Deepen Your Apology After You've Committed Infidelity.
Nice.
And of course, it's on Instagram.
Yep.
And not Instagram, Amazon.
Awesome.
Amazon. I do not do the social media thing. I'm really pretty much retired. And I do see some people virtually.
I love it. You're
online.
living the dream.
But yeah, so my website is www.drdebmiller.com. Dr.
Nice.
Deb Miller.
drdebmiller.com.
So you can get the book.
We're going to have this in our show notes for those of you, that are looking.
There's a connection to the book on the website too. So
great.
Thank you. This was so fun. You guys are really energetic and provocative.
Deb, honestly, it's one of those conversations, as I said before, I could go on for hours. We could talk about this for hours. And I so appreciate you joining us. Thank you for being a part of our podcast. It's a pleasure.
Thank you so much.
Good luck to both of you.
Thank you so much.
In the world.
Thank you. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Take care.
Thank you, Deb.
Do you have this mesmerized?
There's that great episode. We hope
Did
you
you
enjoy
love
it.
it? I know you loved it. We know you.
We do.
We did.
Yep.
It was fantastic. Friends, if you enjoyed it, like us, subscribe us, tell your friends, tell your enemies, send it along, rate, review. Doug needs his ego boosted.
I don't. It's fully intact. And of course, go to we'renotfine.com, no apostrophe, WERENOTFINE.com. Go to We're Not Fine. And we have a place for you to not only subscribe, but also to put any questions you have. So you can do it anonymously. You can put your name in. You can do whatever. We're glad to put your name on the air as well. But the reality is, let us know if you have any questions about relationships or mental health or anything bugging you in this planet right now.
We love your issues.
We love your issues.
It to us.
Feel free to give us anything, and we will try to answer what we can.
Find us on social
There's nothing we won't talk
media.
about.
There's nothing.
Nothing.
It's Douglas L. Jensen with an EN, Dr. Talia Jackson, and We're Not Fine Pod.
Yeah.
And YouTube. Oh my gosh. YouTube is actually, you have to find out how cute we really are and go to YouTube.
Yep.
You'll find us. Just look up We're Not Fine. Bye, y'all. We're not fine, but...
At least we don't have a snowplow named after us.
Really? Because I feel like that's goals.